All right, Ian.
Yeah.
8-Bit Christmas.
Yeah.
Is coming soon. Not to theaters. It's a new movie. It's going to be on HBO Max, I believe. And through Warner Brothers Pictures. It's a movie starring Neil Patrick Harris as a father who reminisces over 30 years ago about wanting for Christmas a Nintendo Entertainment System. And it's funny because he originally points out that it happened, 87. Then he says, oh, it was late 80s. A lot of kids got their NES Christmas of 87. That seemed to be like the year. 87 or 80, definitely 88. Almost
87, 88.
85 was still test market, so like not many people had it. It sold out a lot. You're talking New York, New Jersey, maybe Connecticut. Like that's about it. Then you go to 86. It gets a nationwide release by that spring. They put it in LA as well. But still, it wasn't like it was marketed. It wasn't out there. I remember seeing commercials probably before 87 for the NES. I'm sure they were here and there. Once you get to 87, that's when I think it really started to blow up. The library was a lot bigger. Remember, in 86, there was still only about, 10. There was only about 30 or so games in the first couple years of the NES.
Yeah, it didn't blow up until like 88, 89.
You only had
tons of releases.
You had no third-party games in 85. In 86, you had about 10 third-party games. You had Bandai, you had the first Konami ones, and you had, Data East. That was it. That was it for 80. They're still starting off, basically. I think I have some up there from the 86. So 87 is when you get dozens of third-party games. You get, Legend of Zelda. You get Kid Icarus coming out and Metroid. You start to really...
Right.
You get stuff like, I think it was Rad Racer 87. You really start to see, like, this is what people know the NES for. This is like the bigger hits coming out here, besides the black box ones that were out there. So we're now older folks that grew up with the NES. So some of us do have kids and maybe, explain the stories to kids like this. So this movie is basically, they even say it's a new Christmas story.
Yeah, it looks like they're going for the Christmas story feel and vibe, like very, very much so, with the voiceovers and stuff like that. Even the kids, the way they look with the glasses and shit, it looks very Christmas story-ish. So, Ian, what were your main takeaways seeing this? Is it like weird to see like, wow, we're so far older now, this is our childhood, and we're like reminiscing back over 30 years on something? No, I mean, I'm not surprised. I figured this would happen. It always happens in waves. We always get super nostalgic and start seeing, the reemergence of things from various decades past. I'm really not surprised to see this. Video game systems starting in the 80s with the Nintendo going forward have been like the big Christmas gift for a long time. They definitely, kind of replaced the BB gun. And
that we would have got like in the late 30s to 40s.
Like that. Yeah. That's what they replaced. I don't like nostalgia bait. And I don't have any huge fondness for the 80s. But I do like the original Nintendo, and I like Neil Patrick Harris. So I
like Steve Zahn, who plays the father back in the 80s. I love Steve Zahn.
Yeah. So I may watch this at some point. I'm not overly excited about it. I'm not going to get too hung up on it or try to sound overly negative, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to give it a go.
I'm going to give it a go. I'm interested because it's interesting. You have all the tropes. You have like the cool kid that like already has the NES and it's hard to get. It's almost like he's showing off the Power Glove and just like the Wizard. So it's like they're combining different things together. So it's not historically accurate to the years. Just get over it. It's a general NES time period, of late 80s. So that's fine. But you have like the rich kid who has the Power Glove, and there's some historical inaccuracies. Obviously, it's like, oh, the NES is sold out everywhere. We can't get it. You could find an NES. By then they were making a ton of them. In at least 87. They were advertised in the circulars, at least in New Jersey, New York, every week. Everyone had it.
Well, I got the impression, so I saw that was one of the complaints, was that people said that, by that point in time, it wasn't super hard to get. You could go out there and find them. But my understanding was because it showed the kid in a contest, like trying to do like the door-to-door sales stuff to win a Nintendo. I
think that was after in the store. He can't find one at the store though.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. I thought they were gonna do like a storyline based on like how the parents just didn't have enough money for it or something like that. That would have made more sense. I think that would have been bit more realistic.
Steve Zahn says you're not getting the Nintendo. So it's almost like Christmas Story where the mom is like, you're not getting a BB gun.
Gotcha.
That's where it is. They're really following down that line. Because Christmas Story, it's his quest to get the gun and convince his parents to get him the BB gun. And this seems like it's taking more literal, like it's his quest to get a Nintendo. I like how they call everything a Nintendo, though. I think there's something about that where maybe it's like NES is more trademark Nintendo. You can call it the generic name.
Right.
You know, I think they're doing the same thing in the Game Chasers movie. It's like, oh, we're looking for the Nintendo that we had. I just think that's funny. It looks wholesome. It actually looks a little wholesome. I'm not annoyed about something like this. I think this is fine. Like I said, this is what happens. What video game did they show off the kid playing? Ian? Did you like that?
Rampage fucking sucks. Awful game.
I guess it was cheap to get the rights to show Rampage, and it's the real NES Rampage. It wasn't like the arcade one there. So it takes place. It's like around Illinois, Chicago. No, I think it's weird. Like they're using like GI Joe walkie-talkies in it, or something like that. Green walkie-talkies in late 80s would have been like GI Joe walkie-talkies later on. When I was at the convention this past weekend, you know, you see a lot more of us, a little more gray hair. I grew up with the NES, you know, late 30s to like mid 40s sort of era. And a guy bought the NES book and was talking to his like probably 8-year-old daughter, 7 years old. It's like, hey, honey, this is what I grew up with, and like was talking about these are the games, and it's just like, there you go. That's the circle of life. Like that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. That's how we were, you know, over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Except then your parents couldn't tell you about what video game they played because when they were kids, they didn't exist. So we really are the first generation, you know, the younger Gen X, older millennial or Xennial crossover. Like we are the first generation to really grow up with the consoles and have kids. If you don't count, you know, the Atari stuff, like we were like the first one where it was ingrained in the culture like firmly, and now it's passed on.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
There will no longer be. We're quickly moving into a time period where everyone has experienced video games in some way, shape, or form. There will, you know, give it another 20 years and there's not going to be a generation above us that doesn't remember video games.
We're not too far away from the elderly having grown up with video games, or like 15 years away from that, from like the first Atari kids getting older.
Yeah, I mean, my parents would have been 17 and 16 when the Atari came out.
Sure.
You know, the 2600s.
So we're talking about people that were born, we'll just say in the early 70s, that were kids growing up with the Atari. They're 50 now. Give it another 15, 20 years. That's it. There's going to be no one left alive that at least video games didn't exist when they were kids. That's weird to think about. Like
then we can go look at all those talking heads talking about how video games are just a fad and laugh.
Go back to like the early 80s when the crash was like, we're all going to get computers and that's it. How am I talking about from the 1930s? I don't know. I don't know how they talked in the early 80s. They didn't talk like this.
They sure didn't.
Yeah, that's it. So let's see. I'm going to go look through the cast. Like Steve Zahn's in it. Neil Patrick Harris, who's great and everything. They filmed it in Toronto. There you go.
Yeah.
In March. And no, I'm looking forward. I'm actually, I'm not saying it's going to be the new Christmas Story, though. Like, you know, Christmas Story is now, like at the time, it was like a forgotten movie when it came out. Then it became a classic from being constantly on TV, 24-hour marathons and things like that. It has to be a well-made movie. It has to be smart and wholesome. So I don't think this will supplant the original Christmas Story.
No,
I just don't, because it's a timeless movie, Christmas Story. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not going to be like people being upset about, it's trying to change our childhood. It's like, no, this is now part of the historical time print of the time is like Nintendo. That's like part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how BB guns were in the 30s and 40s. Did your grandfather have a BB gun, or you know, did he?
Maybe. I have no idea.
But BB guns have existed for like over 100 years, I think. So
yeah,
it's interesting. You ever shoot a BB gun? I shot one once.
I did too. I was really unimpressed by it.
It was interesting. I think we set up cans in the backyard.
Yeah,
with my friend.
And then my buddy sat there and pumped air into it, and then we shot a couple of cans, and I was like, all right.
Was the CO2 one? It wasn't like a pump one.
It was a pump one.
It was a pump one.
Yeah,
I remember that. I'm not sure it was a Red Ryder, but I did it. Do you think there would be would there be a 90s equivalent to the Nintendo to the NES if they did a movie like this in like 10, 20 years? Would there be an equivalent to this?
I mean, you couldn't settle upon one.
I think the NES was because
of the market. Because of the market at the time.
It was the video game console. Yeah. It was the one.
You didn't really have other options. He did,
It was
but
what
only people who were really into it knew about him.
It was the one thing that every kid would have wanted.
Yeah.
There's after that point, there's no longer what's the one game console everyone wants.
Right, because it's Splinters.
Or you can do like maybe for like Tickle Me Elmo or like the one-off things, but those are fads. Those are like those aren't like those like that's like Cabbage Patch Kids. Like yeah, it was big for like a year or two.
Sure.
And then, Cabbage Patch Kids was big for a few years. It was giant, but like I guess you're right. It was like every 8-year-old would have wanted a Nintendo.
Yeah.
Like that was the one gift. So all right, let's see what happens with that. Hopefully it gets good reviews. Hopefully it gets better tomato meter than Snake Eyes.
Yeah. What was Snake Eyes' tomato meter?
36%.
It's pretty high.